This is a national health alert from the 24/7 Diabetic Health Hotline. If you, a family member, or loved one has diabetes, now, regardless of your age, if you have insurance, you may qualify to receive diabetic testing supplies with little to no out-of-pocket cost. If you call right now, you could get a free meter upgrade. In addition, we'll give you a free pedometer as our special gift to you. Call now.
Call the 24/7 Diabetic Health Hotline now at 800-478-9970. 800-478-9970.
The Blaze Radio Network. On demand.
Love. Courage. Truth. Glenn Beck.
What would you do if you ran Uber? How would you handle the news that hackers got the personal information on 57 million customers and employees? What would you do if you were an investor in the company and you discovered that managers hid that breach from the public, including those people who had their information stolen, customers, employees? Think about that a moment. If you ran the place, how would you handle that? How would you have handled it before, when you just found out about the hack? How would you handle it now after you found out that people tried to cover it up? Hi there, it's Doc Thompson. I'm in for Glenn today. There is a specific reason why I'm asking you how you would handle it. And I'm going to open up the phone lines in a couple of minutes. 888-727-BECK. I'll also check out some of the tweets you send to the program. It's at Doc Thompson Show. But there's a specific reason I really want to get your thoughts on this. Challenge yourself for a moment. What would you do if you ran Uber? Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, I wouldn't have let it get to this point. Blah, blah, blah. Let me explain what happened. Let me give you the details. And I challenge you to challenge yourself and come up with an answer in your own head. Maybe share it with somebody that's next to you right now. Discuss it with them. And there's a reason I'm asking that I'll get to in a moment. Let me give you the details. More than a year ago, hackers got access to Uber's database, and they stole the personal information of about 50 million Uber users. If you've used Uber, it may have been you. Name, email addresses, phone numbers. This is what they say they got access to. 50 million users. And they got personal information of about 7 million Uber drivers. That includes about 600,000 driver's licenses. So if you're a driver, they may have gotten your information that way, including your driver's license and number. Now, they claim that no social security numbers were breached, no credit cards were breached. They didn't get that information, but come on. Come on, they got all that other stuff. Can we really believe them knowing that for a year, they didn't tell anyone about this, even the people affected? Isn't that a moral breakdown, if not a legal breakdown? I would think so. Is it right they wouldn't tell the people affected by it? Now, I know why. They're trying to protect the company, and I can respect that on a certain level. But don't you care about your customers? I'm not blaming you for the breach. There could have been problems. Maybe you did everything you could through no fault of your own. There was no failure of security. But they got the information. I'm not blaming you for that. I'm blaming you for the cover-up and why you didn't share it. I understand protecting the company. What would you do if you were an investor right now in that company? Because as an investor, it's your company. You run that company. You own it. Yeah, there's managers, CEOs, CFOs, different people that run it on a daily basis, but you own the company. Ultimately, the buck stops with you, right? And the other investors. What would you do if you ran the company? Uber even said they had a legal obligation to report the hack to regulators and to the drivers whose information was stolen, but they didn't. They didn't do it. In fact, when this breach happened, Uber was at the time negotiating with federal regulators about other privacy violations. So they knew of this. It was on their front burner. This is what they were dealing with. And then suddenly the breach happens and they start covering it up. Uber paid other hackers to delete the data and keep the breach quiet, just to cover it up. What would you do now, knowing that if you were an investor? The new CEO, Dara, I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce her name. She said, none of this should have happened, and I will not make excuses for it. We are changing the way we do business. Good. I'd like some details, but good. She said at the time of the incident, we took immediate steps to secure the data and shut down for further unauthorized access. Good. That sounds great. But what specifically are you going to do moving forward? And who will be punished? See, as an investor, if I owned, even in part, that company, I would want people held accountable if there were things done wrong. Obviously, the cover-up, that was wrong. I would want specific, real examples. I want a definitive plan of what you're going to do moving forward to make sure that doesn't happen again, right? Is that what you would want? Wouldn't you want people to be held accountable, and you want to know specifically what will change in the future? That's what I would want too. The reason I ask that is because you may not be an owner of Uber. You may not own stock. But you do own the Veterans Administration. You and I own it. We're American citizens. We have a contractual and moral obligation to do what we said we would do, and that is to care for veterans. And I bring that up because the Veterans Administration has failed far more and continues to fail far more than Uber ever has. The Veterans Administration exposed millions of veterans' information repeatedly, over and over again, over the last 15 years or so. They have done virtually what Uber did. Again, whether they were hacked, the information. One point there was a database stolen. Over and over again, the Veterans Administration has been sloppy. Uber may not have even been sloppy with it. The way that theirs was breached, two hackers got access to a private coding site. So maybe they were sloppy or not. But the Veterans Administration has been irresponsible and sloppy. You own that company. So if you said what I would do if an owner of Uber, I would make sure people were held accountable, and I want a plan in the future. Who has been held accountable? What is the plan for the future? Over and over again, the Veterans Administration has failed us. But it's far worse than breaching private information. There is a new Inspector General report this morning about the Veterans Administration. And it confirms, among other things, that the Veterans Administration facility in Denver has been lying about wait times that track mental health care. How many times do we have to read about this as the owners, the people who are ultimately in charge of saying what is right and wrong within our government? How many times do we have to hear about these stories before we actually hold people accountable and before we actually get a working plan for the future? This has happened over and over again. Most recently, a former VA employee by the name of Brian Smother claimed that the staff in Denver kept separate lists. The same thing that we had.
We heard that before.
Over and over again. Chris Cruz of the Morning Blaze joining me as well, who is a combat veteran, having served both in Iraq and Afghanistan, who suffers with PTSD, who has had his ankles replaced. Chris, over and over again. This is the story. This was the big fail out of Phoenix, as a matter of fact, where veterans died. It had to do with the wait times. Number one, the failure is that veterans do not get the timely service that they need, the timely appointments they need. But then covering it up They covered up the wait times and had a separate list.
It's infuriating.
I don't know what else it takes. How many times do we have to hear these stories?
And not just that, I tried, Doc. I'm not the most healthy person out there. And
well, I think anyone that listens to the Morning Blaze knows that.
Exactly. And one of the things, I had an issue with my heartburn. I get heartburns in the morning, and it's frustrating. And, I thought it was something.
But it's chronic, and it's almost debilitating. The amount of heartburn,
exactly.
right?
So I was like, you know what? I want to get this shot. I don't want to have an ulcer or something wrong with me, because my body's telling me, hey, there's something wrong with you.
Too much acid. It's right there, right?
Exactly. I called the VA in Orlando, Florida. And I was like, hey, I'm scared. The syntax is no longer working. What can I do?
You got in and out, right?
Yeah, you can come in. I was like, oh, good. Thank you.
Good job.
February of the next year. And I was calling.
Wait, what? Were you calling in January?
No, I was calling in July of the year before.
So you called in July, and they said, great, come right in February.
In February.
Wow.
For something that I'm worried because I got heartburn every single morning.
Like excessive.
Excessive. I'm talking about, and then medication says if it prolongs 2 weeks or more, please contact your doctor because it could be something serious.
So they said, this is happening, and if this happens for more than 2 weeks, contact your doctor.
Yes.
And you contact, and they're like, great,
February.
We'll
see you in February of 2017.
Hey, wow, that's good.
And I was like, are you kidding me? They're like, oh, we're busy, but if somebody cancel, we'll call you.
Who's canceling when everybody's backlogged 9 months?
I was like, nobody's going to cancel.
This is infuriating. Think about when I asked you about owning Uber. Maybe you own a business. What if your kids acted this way? What if the guy who cuts your lawn, maybe you're not a business owner, but you employ people to do things from time to time around your house, your veterinarian, your dentist, whatever it is. If this is how they treated you and your information, you would demand accountability and you would demand an answer moving forward, or you would what? No longer do business with them. I think it's time we no longer do business with the Veterans Administration. It is time. It is shut down. Now, veterans out there, don't for a moment think I'm abandoning you. I'm not suggesting we shut it down tomorrow and leave all of you. No. It is a slow shutdown rolling out over the next 4 or whatever years it takes. At the same time, offering veterans another plan where the United States government, and by that I mean American citizens, pick up your health care fees. That's it. There's the solution. We don't need all of these people working within the administration. We don't need levels and levels of bureaucracy. We need money in the hands of those veterans so they can get an insurance policy and go to the doctor. There are doctors everywhere. Doctors that you can get in today if you're not in the Veterans Administration. The veterans would be able to pick whatever doctor they want. That is the accountability. I'm calling for it now. Over and over, breaches of security, veterans being killed, secret wait lists. This continues to happen, and nobody is offering a solution. You want a solution? Here's the solution. Results. We demand results. No more left versus right, Democrat, Republican, unions, or any of that crap. Results. All I want to hear is results. You get in the debate with somebody, you're at Thanksgiving dinner tomorrow, and it comes up. What are the results? What has happened? What are the results? Well, we fired. What were the results? Well, we got a new director. What were the results? This is not 2 years of results we can look at. We can look at the last 50, 60. The Veterans Administration has been around since the 1930s. Prior to that, the Veterans Bureau for 10 years, and they failed. Over and over again, every couple of years. Massive failures. What are the results? All I want, what are the results? We've got a track record of continuous failure. What are the results? Great. There's no denying that. Now, moving forward, if it is anything like we continue to do, well, we're going to get a new, no, that hasn't worked. Well, we'll change, no, that hasn't worked. Shut it down. Give veterans the money or the policies they need to get the health care, and then get out of the way.
Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck.
Doc Thompson in for Glenn Beck. A lot of people tweeting at me. It's at Doc Thompson Show. I'm tired of it. I don't know if we are ever going to actually do this. We keep being lied to. And for some reason, even though most Americans, without question, support veterans and active duty military, we just are not holding them accountable. Maybe it's not as juicy as a story as Harvey Weinstein showered naked in front of people or Charlie Rose showered naked in front of people. What is it? What is with these showering naked in front of people? Why was that enjoyable?
Whatever happened to this normal...
fondling somebody, right?
Groping. No, I'm going to shower, and I want you to watch
I want you
me.
to watch it. I'm not endorsing any of it.
No, I don't want to touch you. I don't want to touch you.
That's
disgusting.
Just an ever level of creepy.
Just stand there and watch me shower like a normal person.
An extra level of creepy, right? That's just, all right. No, I'm not. All of that's wrong, of course. It's just particularly bizarre. I just don't know what it's going to take. So let me give you the basic background to this. The former VA employee said that there was a secret list being kept, and the IG report confirmed, yeah. So what that means is it's impossible to know if the veterans who needed referrals for group therapy or other things actually got it in a timely manner. And they also criticized the record keeping, specifically in the Colorado Springs, Colorado VA, saying that the PTSD cases were not getting the services they need on time. Patients there often waited more than 30 days. 30 days is that's their goal. That with PTSD, you'll be there within 30 days. 30 days is unacceptable to me.
For someone who's suicidal, yeah.
Yeah, knowing that minimum 22, maybe as many as 70 kill themselves, veterans a day.
Yeah.
I would think 30 days is a little long. In fact, in one case, a veteran killed himself 13 days after contacting a clinic there. They were supposed to see him within a week. Had they seen him within a week, like they said they were supposed to or going to, he wouldn't have killed himself. It went 13 days. Now, I know that there will be some limitations. It can't be unlimited. But 30 days for PTSD, I'm sorry. I would think that's something that should be more timely. But they can't even get in within the 30 days. It was a secret list. Why? Why do they keep the secret lists? Often the secret lists are kept to make themselves look good, to make it look like they're actually seeing people sooner than they are, so they get to keep their bonuses. And by the way, President Trump is now on the hook for some of this stuff. No, I did not vote for Trump, but I have given him his due. I, of course, didn't vote for Hillary Clinton, but I vote on track record. His track record was not great, partially because he never been in office before. But I've given him pretty high marks. Supreme Court pick and some other things. I have not been unduly critical, but this is one he now owns. You've been in office coming up on a year. And by the way, some of the people that he fired when he first took office in the Veterans Administration sued and got their job back. How were they able to do this? Via the unions. Meaning the union must be broken at the Veterans Administration. They're protecting bad players. And President Trump needs to lead on this more, and he needs to lead Congress, and Congress needs to get on board. Dramatic changes because the results have shown that it does not work. Meanwhile, the Veterans Administration, the one of Eastern Colorado there that was at the center of all this, they said they agreed with a lot of the IG report, but didn't like the term secret list because, quote, nothing about this process was secret, and that it was discontinued once staff became aware that it violated VA policies. Once they became, who doesn't know that's going to violate policy? If this were the private sector, and whatever the list was, if you worked at a chain restaurant and you had a list of people for reservations, and yet you had a second list that was benefiting your job to have it, you don't know that's going to be a violation? It's at least a moral breakdown, a moral violation, morally wrong, even if it's not specifically laid out in the company handbook? You don't know this? What kind of dolts are you hiring there at the VA if you don't know that this is a problem? Well, it was discontinued once we... Discontinued? You didn't learn from Phoenix or any of the other hospitals that had secret wait lists? Unacceptable. We must demand a change now. This must be... And by the way, this is not one of the difficult ones. We can do this much easier than some of the other things we're trying to tackle. Stop screwing around with taxes and everything else. Those are important as well. Fix the VA and fix it now. In fact, use the hashtag #FixTheVA and tweet at the president.
Glenn Beck.
Are you worried about your mom or dad living alone in their house? Hi, I'm Joan London. Listen, I know how difficult it is to find senior care for someone you love. That's why I recommend a free service called A Place for Mom. They are the nation's largest senior living referral service. Call A Place for Mom today.
To receive free information on senior living communities in your area, call A Place for Mom at 1-800-803-6951.
This is the Glenn Beck Program.
Got to get some tweets now. It's at Doc Thompson Show. If you would, please follow me on Twitter, at Doc Thompson Show. Let's see here. We got Kool-Aid with a C tweeting, hashtag what I learned today. Day before Thanksgiving, and at Doc Thompson Show has me so pissed off. It's time to hashtag fix the VA. Yeah, sorry about that the day before Thanksgiving. We've got some other things to cover coming up. I couldn't let that one go. When I saw it today, I saw people melting down and the media leading with the breach that Uber and the way they covered it up. And that's horrible. It's wrong. You got to decide whether or not you're going to do business with them in the future. That's fine. It's your choice. A lot of companies have had that happen. They tried to cover it up. That seems wrong. But at the same time, I see yet another IG report about the failures of the Veterans Administration, virtually silent from the media. And guess what? We all own the Veterans Administration. They work for us. It's our tax dollars that fund it. And what do we have? We can't vote with our dollars. We have to vote. You vote for who you want, who you think's going to fix it. But unfortunately, there's no accountability. Got a tweet from Rosa tweeting, at Doc Thompson Show, thanks for reminder this morning on GB Show that you didn't vote for Trump. That was a vote for Hillary. No, Rose, you're wrong. It was not. And I'm not letting you pin that crap on me. I didn't vote for Hillary. I didn't support her. She's an abomination. In fact, I border on thinking she's evil. I didn't vote for Trump because I vote on track record. And your nonsense idea that a non-vote for Trump is somehow a vote for Hillary when I voted neither of the two is exactly what's gotten us there. I'm not going to debate this at length today, but I'm tired of this nonsense where you're forcing people into one camp or the other. It's nonsense. Vote for people and hold them accountable. Vote on principle and character and track record that proves their principle and character. Don't hold me accountable for the disaster that are the Clintons. Hillary is Hillary. I didn't vote for her, and I wouldn't vote for her. And how dare you say that to me? I'm the one holding people accountable. I'm also one that's out here every day trying to help people. Veterans Administration. In fact, coming up Friday on this program, I'm going to give people free commercials to promote your business. This is my commitment to helping people. This is what I do all the time. But I'm going to do it on Glenn's program the day after Thanksgiving. Join us, and I will give you roughly 60 seconds or so to promote your business. All you have to do is use the hashtag Building America. Plan on calling up on Friday. If you are planning on calling up, make sure your website works. Make sure that you have enough bandwidth, you talk to your provider or whatever, that can handle hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people clicking at once, because that is the power of this broadcast. Make sure you can handle it because we don't want to crash it. We just want to get you customers. Make sure you have your ducks in a row. Use the hashtag Building America. If you don't get somebody's name and you're listening, you can go back on Twitter and look through Building America, and I'll tweet out a link to all of them. If you don't get through and you want to promote your business, use the hashtag Building America and promote it on Twitter, and other people will see it then as they scroll through. That's my commitment to you, trying to help as much as I can. That's Friday on the Glenn Beck program. We like to tell during our morning broadcast on the Blaze Radio Network the story of entrepreneurs, people with the entrepreneurial spirit, people that dream and do. And a couple weeks ago, we talked to a gentleman who also has a book out called Meaningful Work, A Quest to Do Great Business, Finding Your Calling and Feed Your Soul. His name is Sean Eskinosi, and he joins us now. Hey, Sean, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Sean's also the founder of Eskinosi Chocolate. Tell us how you came to found a chocolate company.
Well, I was a criminal defense lawyer for 20 years. And
that's a perfect leap, right? That makes
exactly, yeah. A logical step from criminal defense lawyer to chocolate maker. But, I did it for 20 years. I spent a lifetime in the courtroom and tried a lot of murder cases, and I loved it. And I think a lot of people can connect to this. I loved it until I didn't. And I could tell in my body and my spirit and my soul that I didn't love it anymore. And that's the kind of job, the stakes are high. you can't just phone it in. And so I was passionate about finding another passion, and I had no hobbies. I didn't do anything else but prepare for trial.
And so real quick, this is one of the reasons we tell stories like yours on our Building America, because it helps promote your business and stuff. But people, aside from hearing about great products and services, they get to hear stories like yours that, relate to them and hopefully inspire them. So you got to that point, you're like, okay, I don't love it anymore. And where do you go from there?
Well, my wife said, and she half jokingly said, "Can't you just double up on your Lexapro?" And the thing is, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't.
You don't take 2 of them in the morning, to feel even double better. But anyway, so what happened is I committed this to prayer, and it was a very simple prayer that went like this: "Dear God, please help me find something else to do." And I said that sometimes 20 times a day. And the thing is, and this is what the book is about, and I think a lot of people understand, they know they want to do something else. They know they have a skill set. They know that they have this idea, but they can't figure out what it is. They don't know, and we're sort of inundated with information. Google now gives us this thought that everything is open to us, and so we're paralyzed. And for me, and this may sound a little counterintuitive, but here's what I did. And I think this is appropriate for Thanksgiving. As this hard-charging lawyer, not thinking about what was the greatest sorrow in my life, which was my dad's death when I was 14. He was my hero and a lawyer too, and he died of lung cancer, and it was the most sad, sorrowful time in my life, and I never really had a conversation with that sorrow, with that grief. And so my daughter read this book to me out loud called Tuesdays with Maury, and it just changed my life. And I started trying to work on grief. And so I volunteered at a local hospital in their palliative care department. And for almost 5 years on Fridays, I would go visit with patients who were dying. And here's the thing. This is the paradox. It was in those moments of not thinking about me that I was able to have space for this idea to start this business of chocolate. That's where it hatched. That's the mystery of serving others, not thinking about yourself, and these things happen. This is where creativity happens. This is where ideas for businesses happen. But Gandhi said, if you want to lose yourself, find yourself in the service of others. Jesus said something similar. The idea is dying to self. It's counterintuitive, but that's how it happened for me.
We hear a lot of stories like that too. Not just people that start businesses or entrepreneurs, but are struggling with something, and the answers are found in the most unlikely of places, and that is not thinking about it and not worrying about you, but worrying about somebody else.
Yeah, I quote Khalil Gibran in the book, who said, and I love this. He said, "Our greatest joy is our sorrow unmasked." And that's what you just said. I mean, it's and that's if I could say, if there's any message, and this is true for businesses, is that someone who needs you. Don't wait. So many business people and entrepreneurs come up to me after talks and stuff, and they say, "Gosh, I need to wait till I get more employees before I, help people out in the neighborhood, or I need more net operating income." And my message is, don't wait. Just roll up your sleeves and start doing it. And the universe conspires behind that decision to help you out. That's what happens.
It's funny, too, because that's ultimately, we've boiled down the entrepreneurial spirit, and I don't mean that just somebody who's for-profit, not that profit's wrong. Sometimes it could be nonprofit. It could be just a small little business as a sideline to, an extra stream of income for your family, whatever. But the spirit is the same, and that is dreaming and also doing. That's the spirit that built America. That's the spirit behind the Industrial Revolution. Everything, from the light bulb to the automobile, whatever it was, to Apple. It's somebody dreaming and being a little passionate about it. And then ultimately, and there's the final step that most of them miss, is doing, rolling up your sleeves, like you said, and doing.
I absolutely. And I just spoke to a bunch of high school students yesterday, and I told them the same thing. The message applies. I don't care. It doesn't matter what age you are. That what you just said is really the key, and it's so simple, but it's hard because we're afraid. We have fear. What happens if I fail? What happens if I can't make payroll? The list is long, but we just need to take that one step. And if I could also say, in listening to the prelude to our interview, you hit on something that I think is really, really, really important.
Yes, sir.
And that is, we can judge businesses by their principles, by their character, and by their track record. And we have the information available to us to judge businesses and products and services in the same way that we judge people that we vote for, because we vote with how we spend our money. And if I could even take it a step further, and this is one of the points I make in the book, I believe that small business is an answer to many of the world's problems. Small business, it doesn't have to be a huge business with 1,000 employees. It could be 10 employees. It could be auto repair shop in your neighborhood that decides to do some of these things that we're talking about, because we have what we call social problems. We have problems with hunger. We have problems with education. We have but small business has a role to play. I believe small business has a role to play as, in my case, as a person of faith, and we have a responsibility to our communities and to our country as business people, as entrepreneurs, I believe. Yes, to make a profit, but also to be involved in our community issues.
I think you're absolutely right, and it's a great message before Thanksgiving. So tell me about the chocolates, Eskinosi chocolates. I just tweeted out a link to Eskinosi.com. That's to your chocolate company, right?
Right. Well, the cool thing about this is I travel to these farms in Tanzania, Philippines, Ecuador, and the Amazon every year. I've done it for 12 years. In January, it'll be my 36th origin trip.
Wow.
It takes me almost 50 hours to get where I'm going to these little villages. I get to look at the cocoa beans, and here's the super cool part. I help farmers open bank accounts so we can pay them directly. Then I open my books to them the following year. We translate our books into whatever language they need. So like when I was in Tanzania in July, the books were in Swahili, so they can see our revenues, our expenses, and then we give them cash, a profit share. And we go to a lot of trouble to do this. And then we bring them chocolate that was made from their beans so they can taste it and see the hard work that they put into it and that we put into it to make this product called a chocolate bar. We made it together. And it's a lot of trouble, but we love it. And we believe that working directly with farmers around the world improves the quality of our product. And the other thing that we do with our company is we take local high school students to Tanzania every other summer to meet these cocoa farmers and to understand, get a front row seat how our business really operates by how we buy these beans from cocoa farmers. And so, yeah, and one of the things we say is about our chocolate. We say it's not about the chocolate, it's about the chocolate. And what I mean by that is we are so focused on the quality of our product. I mean, it's something we think about every day, all day. It's got to be great. It's got to be perfect. And the reason is because we want people to buy our chocolate because they love it, not because of these stories that we talked about at the beginning of the interview. Yes, we want people to understand our character and our principles and our track record, but we believe that those things, principle, character, and track record, they inform the quality of our product. Just like your radio show. I mean, we could say the same thing. It's not about a radio program. It's about a radio program. Why? Because it's not just about ratings or how many ad dollars you get. It's because of something you said. You said, I am trying to help people.
That's the key, Sean. I mean,
that's what it's about.
And this is the message. This is the message of Glenn Beck as well. I mean, most people recognize that about him, wrong or right, and he gets some things wrong, and so do I. But that's our goal. That's who we are. That's our character. Sean, I could talk to you all day long, and we'll have you back at some point. But I want to make sure we get this in. Sean Eskinosi, founder of Eskinosi Chocolate. It's ASKINOSIE. I tweeted out a link to it. And also the book, Meaningful Work. I tweeted a link to it as well. Meaningful Work, a quest to do great business, find your calling, and feed your soul. Thanks so much, sir. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, Doc. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Really inspirational guy. I could go on and on. Get the book. I'm sure it's going to help you out quite a bit. Maybe you think about that tomorrow on Thanksgiving as you're heading and getting together with family as well. But I just tweeted the link, so follow me at Doc Thompson Show, and you can see them both for yourself.
Glenn Beck.
Glenn Beck.
I really didn't want to head down that road. I really didn't want to go down the two-party system today, the day before Thanksgiving. The reason I even shared the one tweet from Rose, whatever, was to just show people I'm transparent in this stuff. The reason I even mentioned I didn't vote for Donald Trump is because I offer that disclaimer so people know, because I'm not the regular host of this program, where I stand on things. I have given the president high praise. I hope he's successful, and I support probably most of what he's tried to do and many of the things he has done, holding him accountable on the things he's failed at so far, still giving him pretty high marks. But the reason I mentioned I didn't vote for him was so people understand, offering full disclaimer, nor did I vote for Hillary Clinton because they don't know my track record. I don't host it every day. And a lot of people, unfortunately, misunderstand and want to make this about an election and should we vote for one of the two main parties. You're wrong if you believe there's only two candidates for president, and if you enjoy only having two people to choose from. The progressive Democrats or the progressive Republicans they offer you, good. But do not blame me because I voted third party. I always vote. Don't think I was saying I didn't vote. I always vote. I just don't always vote for, in fact, I never vote for progressives. I vote for some Republicans when they're not progressives. I do not support progressive Republicans. Track record proves who people are. It shows me their character. If you want to believe that, well, it's the only two viable candidates and use words like that when justifying a forced vote between one of the two, then you know you're wrong. Well, it's the only one who has a chance of. If you have to say that, then you know you're wrong. If you choose that system, which continues to give us crappy Republicans to choose from, then good. That's your choice. Do not blame the failures on me.
Glenn Beck. Love, courage, truth. Glenn Beck.
Ben Shapiro in for Glenn Beck here on the Glenn Beck program. Always an honor to sit behind the mic for Glenn. Congress passed a stopgap spending bill on Thursday, averting a partial government shutdown at midnight on Friday. According to the Washington Post, it pushes into January showdowns on spending, immigration, health care, and national security. Among the issues still to be resolved, aid for victims of recent hurricanes and wildfires. Apparently, the House passed a separate $81 billion disaster relief bill. The Senate did not immediately take it up amid Democratic objections, of course, because Democrats don't want Republicans to be able to solve that problem and then just put it behind them. So here's what it does. The stopgap extends federal funding through January 19th. It provides temporary extensions of the Children's Health Insurance Program. So for all those folks like Jimmy Kimmel claiming that Republicans were cutting taxes for the wealthy so they didn't have to pay for the Children's Health Insurance Program, a program, by the way, created by Senator Orrin Hatch, a Republican, in the first place. The Republicans are going to continue funding CHIP no matter what. Like, that is a program that will continue to be funded because Republicans also have an interest in ensuring that people who can't take care of themselves are able to get health insurance. It's essential that Congress maintain government programs and services for our nation's stability, the stability of our economy, and for the security and well-being of the American people, said House Appropriations Committee Chairman Rodney Frelinghuysen, Republican of New Jersey. It passed the House 231 to 188, cleared the Senate 66 to 32. Those will be the last congressional votes of this year. So what this does is it sets up in January a major showdown over government spending. And that's a showdown that should be had. Because, as I mentioned yesterday on Glenn's show, the reality is that the tax cuts, which I am very much in favor of, I like the tax cut bill. I think it's going to do a lot of good things for the economy. People are seeing money again for the first time in a while. It does, in fact, create new deficits. And the way to solve that is for Republicans to take up the baton and cut spending. Now, I know that it's politically toxic to take up spending, but at a certain point, don't you actually have to use the power at hand? This weird idea that Republicans are going to just see a continuing advance of their power on the federal level. I'm not seeing the poll numbers to support that. So let's assume for just a second that Republicans are not going to retain the House in 2018. The reason I'm assuming that is because the data suggests that they will not. According to the latest polling data, the Republicans are down 18 on the generic congressional ballot. That is full wipeout territory. A lot of that has to do with the personal unpopularity of the president, even if the president has pursued popular policies, which, and as I say, I hope that the president somehow turns it around personally, because he is now inevitably connected with whatever policies he pursues. So if he pursues conservative policies, but he's personally unpopular, that has ramifications for the policy. I don't want to be popular just because I think Trump as a human being matters to me. He doesn't. Politicians don't really matter to me much as quote-unquote human beings. I have a family for that. I have friends for that. I have a community for that. It does matter to me whether he promulgates an agenda I like and successfully makes that agenda more popular. But here's where we stand polling-wise for 2018. I want to go back through the polls over the last several congressional cycles and show you exactly why the polls right now are so terrible. I don't mean mediocre. I mean terrible for Republicans. So, according to Real Clear Politics averages, generic ballots, this time before an election cycle, in 2002, Republicans had a 1.7% generic ballot average lead, 1.7%. Republicans gained seats. In 2004, it was a tied generic ballot. Republicans gained a couple of seats. In 2006, Democrats were plus 12, and there was a huge wave that flipped the House to Democrats. In 2008, Democrats were plus 9. There's another wave in favor of Democrats. In 2010, it was Republicans plus 9. A wave flipped the House to Republicans. In 2012, the Republicans were plus 2. Plus 0.2 is basically dead even. There was a minor change in the Republican-controlled House. They picked up a couple of seats. In 2014, Republicans were up 2.4. And there was another pickup for Republicans in the House, a major pickup for Republicans in the House. In 2016, Democrats were plus 0.06. There was a minor change. The Republicans maintained control of the House. Right now, Democrats are plus 13. So this looks more like 2006, 2008, 2010, all wave elections than it does like 2004, 2012, 2016, even 2014. Right, Democrats are doing quite well in terms of turnout in a lot of these special elections. The reason I'm suggesting this is not because I want Democrats, God forbid, to win the House. I think that would be terrible. I think they would immediately pursue bad policy. The reason I'm suggesting this is because I'm saying power is temporary, but cuts have to be made permanent. When you have power, you have to do what you can to cut where you can. And this is always the unpopular part of the Republican agenda. The unpopular part of the Democratic agenda is raising taxes, which is why Democrats try to avoid raising taxes. It's why Barack Obama signed on to a re-enshrinement of the Bush tax cuts in both 2010 and 2013. That's the unpopular part of the Democratic agenda. And when Democrats are honest about raising taxes, it really hurts them. Right? Walter Mondale comes to mind in 1984 in San Francisco, announcing that part of his program was to raise taxes. Bernie Sanders, he can talk about raising taxes all he wants, but once he's a presidential candidate in a general election and he starts talking about raising the middle-class tax rates to 60% like they are in the socialist European countries he loves so much, that's pretty much going to kill whatever presidential hopes he has. Democrats are constantly trying to avoid that plank in their platform. Republicans are constantly trying to avoid the plank in their platform that says you're supposed to cut spending and bring it in alignment with government takings. And that's a problem, because the government spending is going to go up, up, up. So this government shutdown, the possibility of a government shutdown in January, Republicans should make clear their spending priorities, and then they should force Democrats into the position of having to argue that they want to shut down the government rather than cutting spending on foolish programs. The party in power, supposedly, this is the typical conventional wisdom, the party in power has the upper hand during government shutdowns. This is why even Republicans, many of them, were upset about Ted Cruz's government shutdown in 2013. The idea being that Cruz said, we don't want to fund Obamacare, just cut the funding to Obamacare. And then Barack Obama allowed the government to shut down, and then the Republicans were blamed, right? The idea for establishment Republicans, at least, I don't think this is quite correct, but their logic was that Republicans would be blamed for the government shutdown. And the polling numbers showed there was some truth to that, but it didn't have any long-term repercussions. But if we're going to use that argument as establishment Republican types, as media types, well, then the same holds true now. Trump is the president. If the Democrats shut down the government, then it's on them. So Trump should make his spending priorities clear. That means funding the wall. It means cutting funding in a lot of other areas. Instead, however, it looks like the Republicans are going to pursue the sort of big government, quote-unquote, compassionate conservatism that you saw during the George W. Bush era, which is to say lower taxes and blow out the spending. And there's no excuse for that. Right? Ronald Reagan also increased spending over the course of his tenure, but he was working with the Democrat Congress. Trump has a Republican Congress, so increasing spending seems like a waste of an opportunity. And yet today, this morning, President Trump tweeted out, quote, "At some point, and for the good of the country, I predict we will start working with the Democrats in a bipartisan fashion." He says infrastructure would be a perfect place to start. After having foolishly spent $7 trillion in the Middle East It is time to start rebuilding our country. So first of all, that talking point has always stuck in my craw a little bit, this idea that the spending that is preventing us from growing in this country is military spending is not true. It's just not. Okay, the spending that's preventing us from growing is the entitlement spending. It's the spending on Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. That's 66% of the federal budget. And the idea that the defense budget is really what's quashing growth is just, it's not actually true. But it's the first part that matters. Right? Trump may now swivel to the left. So I said yesterday that where we are with regard to President Trump, maybe we are seeing a new leaf because the last 3 weeks of policy have been as conservative as any policy I have ever seen from any administration. Incredibly, incredibly powerful. But is that the beginning of this great longed-for period of conservative ascendance, or is this Trump signing off on his conservative agenda so he can then swivel to the left and try and pick up some votes for the midterm and re-enshrine his election efforts in 2020? Right? Is he going to turn to infrastructure now? Because there were a lot of folks who were encouraging him to move to infrastructure right off the bat, that as soon as he got in office, he should work with Democrats and spend $1 trillion on infrastructure. Now, to be fair to Trump, some of the plans he's been proposing are not fully the federal government coming in and funding infrastructure. Some of them were supposed to be public-private projects. Nonetheless, the vast majority of infrastructure problems in the United States are not federal problems, they are state problems. It should be on states to do it. It should be on states to fix their infrastructure. Now, the federal government really does not have a serious place in the infrastructure business. And I know everybody loves the Eisenhower highway system. I got to tell you, you love it because it's there. If there had been no Eisenhower project to build the national highway system, this is sort of the libertarian idea, then the states would have built highway systems and connected them. You want to know why Route 66, and the route about which Nat King Cole sung? You want to know why that has become basically a barren wasteland? It's because of the Eisenhower highway system. People built all of their shops and stores around Route 66, and then Eisenhower built a highway system that completely bypassed Route 66. Now, you may love the interstate highway system. I love traveling it too. But the reality is that we spent an awful lot of money on a highway system that was probably going to be built in a more convenient way by states that knew where the populations were in the first place. Okay, and that's the most famous example of a successful infrastructure project. Usually, when there's a massive government infrastructure project, that massive government infrastructure project ends up spending enormous amounts of money on a bunch of random nonsense. That's what the Barack Obama stimulus package was. It stimulated nothing. I can remember driving through Los Angeles and seeing the big orange signs that said American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. Ooh. Sometimes they were green. And invariably, it would be followed by a line of cones with no one working on the road. That was always what it was. Because the roads never got any better, but there was a sign now, and that meant that something was happening. The obsession with infrastructure is just an excuse for Republicans to avoid cutting spending. And that's really what they need to be focused on right now if they want to do any good, because we are bilking future generations. This, again, is the part of the agenda nobody wants to talk about because it's unpopular. But guess what? When you have power, that's the time to do something with the power, not to sit around hoping that an infrastructure project is going to save your bacon from a bad midterm election. Now, as we continue here on the Glenn Beck program, Rosie O'Donnell's back at it again. Yesterday, she was sexually harassing me. Today, she's sexually harassing me. No, I'm not joking. My life has gotten very weird. Ben Shapiro in for Glenn Beck.
Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck.
Me too, folks. Me too. Ben Shapiro here for Glenn Beck, and I feel the pain. Rosie O'Donnell has now sexually harassed me twice in 2 days. And I can say honestly, it has struck me to my core. It all began 2 days ago when Rosie O'Donnell tweeted out that she thought that it would be worthwhile to offer senators bribes. She actually tweeted out that she offered Senators Jeff Flake and Susan Collins $2 million each on Twitter if they would vote against the Republican tax reform package. This, by the way, is a federal felony under 18 U.S. Code 201B, which says openly that if you offer politicians bribes for votes, that you will have to pay the amount of the bribes that you offered 3 times that to the federal government and or 15 years, up to 15 years in a federal penitentiary. So Rosie broke the law. So I tweeted out that Rosie had broken the law. I tweeted out that if the President of the United States initiated a legal investigation into Rosie O'Donnell via Attorney General Jeff Sessions, he would immediately have his face carved into Mount Rushmore. Human beings wouldn't even have to do it. A lightning bolt from God would just strike Mount Rushmore, and boom, Trump's face would be on there. But Rosie O'Donnell didn't take kindly to that. And she tweeted directly at me that I should suck her bleep. Her bleep was a male appendage, which is weird. So she sexually harassed me, and I said, listen, Rosie, you're already a felon. There's no reason for you to be a homophobic sexual harasser. Me too. Me too. And then she got even more angry, and she suggested this morning, sadly, she sexually harassed me again this morning. I don't know what Rosie O'Donnell's problem is. But she tweeted out, lick me too, Ben. Now, there are a wide variety of reasons why I would never do that. But I tweeted in response, no means no, Rosie. No means no. Hashtag me too. And then, just for the funsies of it, I let the Twitter people know that I was being sexually harassed by Rosie O'Donnell and that this was targeted abuse. The reason I did that is not because I want Twitter to actually throw Rosie O'Donnell off Twitter or anything like that. It's just that Twitter's standards are applied wildly inconsistently. And Twitter, like a lot of major tech companies, will target conservatives for bad behavior, but they will leave the left alone with regard to bad behavior. Now, I have a standard which is I don't like people being banned from places like Twitter for pretty much anything. I'm pretty much a free speech absolutist when it comes to this. If you're going to have a standard, then I think it is fair to say that abuse like suck this or lick that stuff should be ruled out of bounds by Twitter, and it should be equally applied. But that was my point. Because imagine if I had said something similar in reverse to Rosie O'Donnell. Can you imagine? Well, first of all, it would end my career, right? I mean, that would be the end of my career. It would also be the end of my sanity and my decency. But the left would respond with full outrage, ire. I would be banned from Twitter, no question. So we will find out whether, in fact, there's a double standard with regard to sexual harassment, so long as you are an anti-Trump, rabid left, non-straight human. If you are a conservative, however, then you can be banned from Twitter for pretty much anything. So let's find out. Let's find out how accurate their standards are. Let's see. Let's find out. So, all right, meanwhile, the House is now looking at a plan requiring lawmakers to pay for their own sexual harassment settlements. And when people say that Congress is just filled with terrible people, one of the reasons why they say that is because Congress apparently over the last 20 years has paid out $1.5 million in sexual harassment settlements of your money, of my money, of everybody's money except their own. The House Administrative Committee announced on Thursday that it expects to advance legislation in the new year that would force lawmakers accused of harassment to reimburse taxpayers for settlements. A bipartisan group of lawmakers is working on legislation to overhaul Capitol Hill's reporting system for harassment complaints. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have called for more transparency toward harassment settlements and for ending the practice of putting taxpayers on the hook for members of Congress accused of misconduct. Legislation is expected to be introduced when Congress reconvenes in early January. This seems like a pretty easy fix and something that Congress certainly should pursue. Otherwise, it looks like, honestly, otherwise it just looks like they're trying to pay off their Al Franken proclivities with your money. Speaking of which, Al Franken bade a fond farewell to Capitol Hill on Thursday. He grabbed life by the breasts. And Al Franken gave a lengthy broadside against the policies of the Trump administration and called for politicians to commit themselves to honesty in public discourse. Because if there's one man who knows honesty in public discourse, it's a guy who goes to rope lines and gropes women's butts. As I have said about Al Franken before, I take thousands of pictures with people a year. I just did an event down in Florida, hundreds of kids. I speak on dozens of college campuses every year. So when I say thousands of pictures with comely young women, okay, that is not really an exaggeration. I take pictures with lots and lots of young people. Okay, comely or not. Never once has it occurred to me to sexually harass or abuse those young people, because that's absurd. But that's apparently what Al Franken was doing. He was just going to events and risking everything to grab a butt. So Franken people were wondering, like me, whether he was actually going to leave, that after Roy Moore lost his race, the Democrats ceased to have a function in shaming Al Franken. And so instead, they decided that they would basically allow him to stick around. There were a bunch of senators who had signaled that. Franken himself said, I'm out. And Franken, what he really should have done, I mean, if you were politically bright, what he would have done is he would have immediately said when these allegations came out, I'm stepping down to make myself a better man. The president should do the same. And it's a blot on our institutions that people like me who are willing to go and fix themselves step out, but people who are not stay. Like, that would have been a smart political move. Instead, Franken launched a broadside. He lamented the degradation of truth. Again, Al Franken lamenting the degradation of truth. The irony is simply too rich. He said, as I leave the Senate, I have to admit, it feels like we're losing the war for truth. Maybe it's already lost. If that's what happens, we have lost the ability to have the kinds of arguments that help build consensus. Yes, nothing builds consensus quite like a lifelong comedian running for Senate, basically stealing his seat from Norm Coleman through voter fraud, and then using his seat to promulgate the most leftist agenda imaginable. If I think unifier, I think Al Franken. Unifying his hands with other people's body parts. As we continue here on the Glenn Beck program, a lot of people very angry about the tax cuts. Some are making very stupid arguments, and we will explain the stupidest of these arguments when we return. Ben Shapiro in for Glenn Beck.
Glenn Beck.
Are you worried about your mom or dad living alone in their house? Hi, I'm Joan London. Listen, I know how difficult it is to find senior care for someone you love. That's why I recommend a free service called A Place for Mom. They are the nation's largest senior living referral service. Call A Place for Mom today.
To receive free information on senior living communities in your area, call A Place for Mom at 1-800-803-6951.
This is the Glenn Beck program.
Taxmageddon. The effects are just brutal. We were told everyone would die, and boy, the Democrats were sure right about that one. Dying from being burdened with their additional wealth. Okay, so Ben Shapiro in for Glenn Beck. More Taxmageddon updates. Okay, so thanks to the Republican tax cut in Texas, New Braunfels-based Rush Enterprises is now planning to give each of its employees a $1,000 bonus after Trump signed the tax reform bill into law. It's a commercial truck dealer. They said all of their approximately 6,600 U.S. employees will receive a $1,000 bonus. In Wisconsin, Associated Bank said on Thursday it would boost its minimum hourly wage to $15 and pay workers a $500 bonus when the recently passed federal tax reform is signed. The Green Bay-based bank said it will raise its minimum wage to $15 an hour from $10, a 50% boost. And they said this would affect about 55% of its workers, about 3,000 workers or so. In Idaho, Malaluka Inc. announced it would be the latest major business to give its workers bonuses in response to Trump's tax cuts. Frank Vandersloot, who is indeed a Republican's owner, said in a phone interview that his 2,000 workers would get a one-time bonus of $100 for every year they have worked at the company. On average, employees have stayed at the company for 8 years, resulting in an $800 bonus. They also have 147 employees who've worked for Vandersloot for 20 years or more. Royal Hawaiian Heritage Jewelry in Hawaii. The owner hopes that this is going to help her business. She's from Kauai. And so she has said that she is going to expand her operations, and she's going to open a couple of new stores. By the way, it's also worth noting that there are some new reports out, and I discussed yesterday people whose taxes are going to be increased, people like me in California, because of the mortgage interest deduction is going down to $750,000, and because state and local tax deductions have now been ruled out of bounds. And people are pointing out that may be a little exaggerated because people who are already paying a ton of tax in the state of California are already getting hit by the alternative minimum tax, meaning that there is a catch-all provision in the tax code that basically prevents you from taking enough deductions to get below a 26% threshold if you earn a lot of money. And so it's likely that I've already hit the alternative minimum tax. Or if I haven't, then I guess I could lose money, I suppose, through this. But the alternative minimum tax is already catching those people. Jack Mecke is a tax associate at financial planning firm Vestboard. He says there's a lot of noise about workers in California, New Jersey, New York, and Illinois facing higher taxes, but 80% of our clients were already paying the alternative minimum tax, so they don't benefit at all from state and local deductions in the first place. I will be honest with you, I do not actually do my own taxes by hand. I have an accountant who does it. I just give them all my receipts. So I'm not sure whether my taxes would actually go up. I have assumed they will, but I will ask my accountant and get back to you on that. I know everyone is fascinated with my accounting. It's just as fascinating to you as it is to me, I would assume. Meanwhile, Democrats and some never-Trumpers, and when I say never-Trumpers, I don't use that in the derogatory sense that so many people use it. I don't mean everybody who didn't vote for Trump, right? I didn't vote for Trump. Right? People tend to group people like me into the never-Trump category, even though never-Trump no longer applies. And never-Trump ended the day of the election. Now, I am sometimes Trump. When he does good things, I cheer wildly. When he does bad things, I boo. Because that's exactly how I would treat any other politician. And by the way, I never said during the election cycle that you shouldn't vote for Trump. I said I couldn't because he didn't meet my minimum standards for qualification. But I always said, repeatedly over and over, that if you were voting for Trump to stop Hillary, I understood your vote. In any case, there are some actual, quote-unquote, never-Trumpers, people who have basically decided that no matter what Trump does, it's wrong. One of those people is Jennifer Rubin over at the Washington Post. So Jennifer Rubin was taken to task by Charles Cook over at National Review, full disclosure, an outlet for which I write. And Charles basically pointed out that Jennifer Rubin had basically switched her positions on half of issues just to bang on Trump. That she spent an awful lot of time just knocking Trump over stuff that she agrees with him about because she doesn't like Trump personally. Now, that's never Trump to me. People who do stuff like that. And that's real never Trump, because it really means never Trump. He can never do anything right. Well, Jennifer Rubin is back at it, complaining about these tax cuts. And how is she complaining? Well, she's complaining because people on the lower end of the income scale are not getting that much money back. So what she says is that $75, which is the amount that some people are getting back, $75 would probably cover Trump's lunch tab at her father's club, Ivanka Trump's lunch, but really does nothing for low-income families. She's quoting the CBPP, which is the Congressional. Let's see, what does this group mean? The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. And what they say is the final bill does nothing compared to the Senate bill to improve lives of 10 million children in low-income working families. Those children will get only a token increase of up to $75 per family or no increase at all. Many working families with children under 17 with incomes that are too low or owed much or any income tax can get part of the CTC, the child tax credit, as a tax refund. As noted, that refundable amount is limited under the current law to 15% of their earnings over $3,000. The Senate bill lowers that threshold so that earnings over $2,500 would count toward earning a child tax credit, translating to a CTC increase of just $75 for those families. So then Jennifer Rubin says that $75 doesn't really do anything for people. Well, she should probably ask people who are poor, because $75 does $75 worth of work for them. This has created an awful lot of blowback. For people who have been middle class and wealthy their entire life, $75 doesn't sound like a lot of money. To people who are making $12,000 a year, $75 is not a pittance. It's not a tiny amount of money. It's $75. At $75 will buy you, if you're a single person, buy you a week's worth of meals. Right? That's not a tiny amount of money. It just shows the disconnect. The left is now being forced to basically play reverse class warfare. Right? The left is now being forced to say that poor people don't have any value for small amounts of money, which is really silly. Only rich people say that. And then there's Charles Blow, whose name is indicative of the quality of his work, writing in the op-ed pages of the New York Times. And he says, with their tax bill, Donald Trump and the Republicans are raiding the Treasury in plain sight, throwing crumbs to the masses as the millionaires and billionaires make off with the cake. Okay, again, it was not the Treasury's money, it's their money. Because America should be aghast not only at the looting, but also at the brazenness of its execution. He says, it seems that for as long as I can remember, Republicans have been wringing their hands about deficits, and yet, in this budget, they willfully exploded the deficit, not for public uplift or rebuilding America's infrastructure, but rather on the spurious argument that giving truckloads of money back to businesses will spark their benevolence. Okay, well, again, each and every day there are new stories of businesses that are not being benevolent. They're increasing their business and or paying their workers more so that workers feel good about tax cuts, right? And I love this idea that suddenly Democrats are wringing their hands about deficits. Okay, I said earlier, Republicans should be wringing their hands about deficits. Now would be the time to cut. You just took some money out of the federal treasury. That was our money. Good. But I'm not of the. I've never been a big fan of the Laffer curve. There's an argument about the Laffer curve. The Laffer curve, for people who don't know, is this concept that was created by a guy named Art Laffer, economist who was very instrumental in the Reagan tax plan. And his basic idea was this: if the tax rate is 0, then the income to the government will be 0. If the tax rate is 100, then the income to the government will be zero because no one is going to work just for the government unless they're paid, right? If the tax rate is 100, then the income will be zero. Somewhere in the middle is sort of the ideal tax point for increasing revenue. And if you move the tax rate down from 100 back towards zero, then you will increase the amount of revenue in the federal treasury by increasing the size of the economy. So the economy grows, and sure, you're now only taking in 20% of income rather than 30% of income, but the economy has doubled. So 20% of a doubled economy is more than 30% of a halved economy. That's the basic notion of the Laffer curve. It's right, but the reason that I object to using that logic is because it suggests that the quality of a tax cut should be measured on how much money is taken in additionally to the federal treasury. I think that that's a fool's errand. I'd like to starve the beast. I'm not interested in increasing money to the federal treasury. I don't like using the argument that the economy will increase and the government will take even more money in. I don't want the government to take more money in. If the government takes more money in, they should cut taxes again. They should just continue cutting taxes. But this is one of the things that is so bizarre about the left's view of deficits. Right? The left says that a deficit created by them spending on infrastructure is fine. A deficit created by you keeping your own money is not fine. Okay. Charles Blow says the tax bill will lead to an increase in the deficit of $1.5 billion over the next 10 years. And he says, when this bill leads to predicted deficits, Republicans will return to their sideline deficit rhetoric, armed with a sickle, aiming the blade at the social safety net, exacerbating the egregious imbalance of the tax bill's original sins. That's the strategy. Appease the rich on the front end, punish the poor on the back, feed the weak to the strong. So what he's complaining about now is if I keep my own money, then where's the money for the social safety net going to go? And the answer is that people should be using the money to invest in their own retirements. Right? This is a fundamental disconnect. It's why Republicans need to argue that government programs do not do what they are cracked up to do. Otherwise, you do end up in the bind that Blow is performing for you. Right? Blow is basically saying every single time you cut taxes, you are taking money away from entitlements because you're going to have to cut entitlements on the back end. What Republicans should be saying is we want to cut entitlements so we can kill two birds with one stone. We can restructure entitlements. They must be restructured, by the way. You can seize the property of every millionaire in the United States wholesale, and it will not come close to paying off the federal debt. It will not even come close to it. But Democrats are really upset because they figure that every time Republicans raise the deficit with tax cuts, that this will somehow lead to cuts on the other end. First of all, it's not true because Republicans never cut anything, sadly. Second of all, Republicans should be looking to cut regardless of what the tax rate is. The government should not be performing these functions. I'm a young person. I'm 33. I'm never going to see a dime of my Social Security cash. It's gone. It's going to pay for my grandmother and other grandmothers like her. Well, the people have been made promises. We should keep those promises, obviously. But for people like me, how about this? How about I get to keep more of my own money and invest it in the stock market? And we restructure entitlements on a contribution basis rather than a withdrawal basis. Because it is a giant Ponzi scheme. This is going to have to be restructured at some point. And this is why Republicans need to talk about restructuring separately from tax cuts. Otherwise, Democrats are going to link the two together. They're going to suggest that tax cuts are bad because entitlements have to be paid for. Republicans should be saying we need to restructure entitlements, and also you should have lower taxes. Not you should have lower taxes because of entitlement reform, but you should have lower taxes because lower taxes are better, and entitlement reform should happen because entitlement reform is better. But as we continue here on the Glenn Beck program, Nancy Pelosi makes another bizarre literary reference, and apparently Democrats think that corporations don't mean it, but governments do. I'm Ben Shapiro in for Glenn Beck.
Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck.
This is Ben Shapiro in for Glenn Beck here on the Glenn Beck program. Always a pleasure and an honor to sit in for Glenn. Okay, so there's this weird notion in a lot of leftist circles, a lot of people in the Democratic Party, that corporations don't mean it. If a corporation gives you a raise, it's because they're cynical and cruel and trying to buy you off. That's the deal with corporations. They're just terrible, terrible people. They're all terrible. They were good when they were poor, but now that they're getting bigger and they're growing, they're really terrible to their employees. Now, I've worked for a fair number of companies at this point in my life. I have run at least a couple. I run one right now, over at the Daily Wire. We had a Christmas party last night. We're pretty nice to our employees. I'll be honest with you. We have 35, 40 employees who live in the city of Los Angeles, work out here. And we're pretty nice to them. Give them some pretty nice Christmas gifts. We treat them well because we like to work with them, because we want to treat our employees well. And if you ask anybody who owns a business, they feel the same way about their employees. They feel a loyalty to their employees. Their employees are helping them build a business, helping them build a lifestyle, helping them build a product. But if you listen to Democrats, corporations are evil, blood-sucking leeches on the American people. Government, however, which literally forces you to give up your money at the point of gun, government has your best interest at heart. So the people who are engaging in a voluntary transaction with you to build a business with you to help enrich you and your family in order to create better products for everyone, doing this all together, those people are the bad guys. But the government that forces you to hand over your cash, those are the nice people. And this is what Elizabeth Warren says. She sends out a few smoke signals, and then she says this.
I want to be absolutely clear. I am delighted when workers get more money. I'm glad when it happens at any corporation in America. Yay. But let's be really clear. If these corporations had wanted to do that, they already had plenty of profits to do it. The idea that this is trickle-down economics at work rather than just plain old politics is just wrong. The corporate CEOs have already told us what they're going to do with this money. I'll give you an example. Home Depot, right after the Senate passed the tax bill a couple of weeks ago, Home Depot CEO executive is interviewed and said, so what are you going to do with all of this money that Home Depot has? Because they're going to do really well on this. Was it we're going to raise wages for our employees? No. Was it we're going to hire more employees at the Home Depot stores? No. Was it we're going to build more Home Depots across America? No. They said what we're going to do is we're going to do stock buybacks.
Okay, so let's stop it right there. Stock buybacks are where a company decides to increase its own stock price by buying back stock because they're investing in their own future in the company. Okay, but the idea that the corporations, they're all evil and they're manipulative and they're trying to be greedy. The point is that in a free market, your greed, your self-interest leads you to derive products for others. In a government system, greed leads you to steal other people's money and then use it for your own nefarious purposes without any redress to the person whose money you just took. As we continue, we're going to do Trump in Review 2017. How'd the president do? I'll tell you. Ben Shapiro in for Glenn Beck.
Glenn Beck. Love. Courage. Truth. Glenn Beck.
Well, it's an honor to sit in for Glenn Beck here on the Glenn Beck program. Ben Shapiro here, sitting with you on this Friday just before Christmas, and I hope that you do have a wonderful Merry Christmas. Hope you've had a great holiday season. If you're a Hanukkah celebrator, that's over for you already, so it's time to move on to Christmas for the rest of the country. And I love this time of year. As a Jew, I love the Christmas time of year. I mean, it is just a beautiful holiday. I heard a really good explanation the other day from my friend Andrew Clavin about somebody had asked him, why is it that all the best Christmas songs are written by Jews? He had a really good answer, and his answer was that if you're a Jew in the United States and you watch Christmas playing out, you're always watching it through somebody else's window, and so there's always a feeling of sort of nostalgia about it. Nostalgia isn't really the right word. There's a wistfulness to all that kind of music that really hits home for the holidays. I think there's some truth to that. I love the Christmas season. It's beautiful to watch. As a Jew, I am grateful that this is a Christian country, a country that relies on a godly view of man and man's role in the world. That's why America is great. It's because we are good, and we are good because we have our roots in biblical morality going back to both the Old and New Testaments. So, little Christmas cheer for you there. Now, let's go through President Trump's year, because we're at the end of the year. So how did it go? How'd it go? And you know what? I'll take your calls here. I want to hear what your grades are for the president. The number is 888-727-BECK, 888-727-BECK. So I'm going to give you my grade. First, I'm going to go through his accomplishments and his demerits, because I want to be as objective about this as possible. My model for Trump has always been good Trump, bad Trump. In fact, I was the originator of this binary where I said there is good Trump and there's bad Trump. He's bifurcated. He's not always good. He's not always bad. When he's good, we cheer. When he's bad, we don't. But you have to view him that way, because if you're going to be honest about your politicians rather than just following the leader, you need to look at what they're doing on a day-by-day basis and decide whether it's good or not. I don't believe in politician worship because it's just another form of idol worship. I don't believe in the MAGA, 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 4D, underwater, upside down, chess playing genius. I don't believe everything that Trump does is well thought out or brilliant. But I also don't believe, like some folks seem to, that everything that Trump has ever done is wrong and terrible. And even if he does something I agree with, he's ruining it because it's Trump. I don't believe that either. So I want to go through his accomplishments this year, and then we'll go through the things that he has done wrong this year, and then I'll give you my final overall grade for the president this year. Because, hey, who knew where this was going to go on January 20th? I mean, did anyone have a real clue? You may have had your suspicions. You may have been optimistic or pessimistic, but no one had any idea. So, good Trump this year. Number one, obviously, Justice Gorsuch. The appointment of Justice Neil Gorsuch was a big move for the president. The president made the smart move early on in his administration of basically outsourcing his judicial picks to Federalist Society. For folks who don't know Federalist Society, I went to Harvard Law School. I was a member of FedSoc. FedSoc is a libertarian/conservative legal organization. It organizes conservatives and libertarians all over the country at the nation's top law schools. And basically, Trump went to the leadership of FedSoc and he said, select for me judges. They did. He followed through. Good for him. So Justice Gorsuch sits on the Supreme Court. Big win for President Trump. Second, ISIS has largely been wiped out. They've largely been wiped out. Their territorial holdings, which at one point were their bragging point, right? They used to claim that they controlled an area larger than that of the UK. They've basically been reduced to nothingness. President Trump has to do with that. I won't give full credit to President Trump for that because he basically was following an Obama policy, but he did broaden and expand it. He changed the rules of engagement, and he did that without toppling Bashar Assad. Now, there's an argument to be made that he should have moved to topple Bashar Assad, one of the world's worst human beings, a man who's used chemical weapons on his own people. But the idea that these two things were integrally related, that in order to topple ISIS and finish ISIS, you had to remove Assad, that was not true. Okay, the soaring stock market, the unemployment rates down. Right? He gets some credit for that, but not all. I want to be intellectually honest, as always, about how the economy works. The stock market went up in Trump's first year by a significant amount, went about 12%, something like that. In Obama's first year, it went up 55% actually, like 35 to 55%, something in that area. I did not attribute rising stock markets to Obama. I will not do the same for Trump. Same thing with unemployment. But there's no question that the business climate is much better now because businesses don't fear that President Trump is going to come in and just destroy them the way the businesses feared that any moment now President Obama was going to issue a new regulation cracking down on how businesses operated. Cutting regulations, big accomplishment for President Trump. He brags that he's cut 22 regulations for each new one created. That's a big achievement for the President of the United States. Now, he needs to maintain power in order for that to stick around because the regulators are going to be able to reinforce those regulations the moment he's out of office. But that is a big accomplishment for the president. He has helped curb Iran. So Iran's regional power was growing. Trump has worked very hard to put together a coalition, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, Israel, against the Iranian growth. He has also decertified the Iran deal. He should pull the United States out and just reissue new sanctions against Iran. He's decertified it, supposedly in preparation for that, but he should go further there. He announced Jerusalem as Israel's capital, which I thought was the gutsiest, ballsiest move of the Trump administration thus far. I'm not sure that any other Republican would have done it. I think Ted Cruz would have. One of the reasons I supported Cruz in the primaries. But I think that it's unlikely any other Republican president would have done so. Good for Trump for doing it. It was a power move. It was a strong move. It's one of the best moves he's made. It reshapes how the Middle East operates. He's opened public lands, or he started to move to do so. A lot of the West, a lot of the western territories of the United States are controlled by the federal government. That's asinine. This is what drove the entire hubbub over Clive and Bundy and the Bundy family. Right, the Bundy family and they got into it with the federal government because they'd been using quote-unquote public lands to graze their cattle. They'd been doing that for generations. The federal government fenced it off for purposes of some desert tortoise, and then they basically attempted to take the Bundys' living away from them. The Bundys resisted in possibly illegal fashion. There was just a hung jury in their case. The reason that happens is because the federal government has fenced off too much land. If you look at Nevada, like 90% of the land is controlled by the federal government. Trump is opening a lot of that up, or he's at least looking to do so. He's also passed new North Korean sanctions. Now, North Korea, a lot of people are worried deeply about North Korea firing a nuclear missile. I don't think that's something North Korea would do simply because it wouldn't be in their interest. The only thing the Kim family wants is to remain in power. The minute they launch on us, we annihilate them. So Trump has done what Trump is capable of doing, which is he has talked to China about it. He's tried to use China to pressure North Korea, and he's passed new sanctions through the UN. I don't think those are going to be effective, but I'm not sure Trump has a lot of other options there. Repeal of the individual mandate. Big win for the president. Takes out a central plank of Obamacare. Now we got to take out the other plank. And this is where I think Trump is already signaling he's not going to do it, which is a problem. You need to remove the federal regulations on the insurance companies if you want to have a free market that is going to lower costs in the individual insurance market. That's the next step. But he does get credit for getting rid of the individual mandate. Really, it's Senator Tom Cotton who's responsible for that, and Mitch McConnell who's able to put this in the tax bill. Tax reform, obviously a huge win for the president. We've been talking about it the last couple of days. A record number of appellate court appointees. He has nominated 12 appellate court judges, more than any other president historically. That's a big win for the administration, which had pledged to remake the judiciary along constitutionalist lines. He pulled out from the Paris Accords. Now, the Paris Accords were never formally binding. The Paris Accords were never something that were going to trap the United States unless we wish to be trapped. But as a symbolic matter, it is important that the world knows that we are not going to sign off on America's domestic policy being run by foreign regulators from abroad. President Trump's travel ban, which I think is both overbroad and underbroad. It's a little too narrow in some ways because it doesn't include enough countries, and it's overbroad in that it includes everyone from those countries. But the travel ban is a step in the direction of acknowledging a reality, which is there are certain countries where we have a difficult time actually getting any sort of vetting material from them. That travel ban was initially rolled out pretty horribly, but now it has been certified by the courts, as well it should be. And finally, he's unshackled the military and he's supported police. So being not Hillary is his number one accomplishment. Right? And he passed that bar from the very beginning. Being not Obama with regard to the police. President Obama had a very negative perception of the belief of the police, a perception that he really cast out into the wind and harmed a lot of police officers with. You see the crime rates went up dramatically in Obama's last couple of years in office. Violent crime rates did, murder rates in major cities particularly. Those crime rates went up pretty dramatically because of the so-called Ferguson effect. The Ferguson effect is the fact that the federal government and the media have focused so harshly on police, and police said, fine, if you're going to do this, if I'm going to put my life in my hands every time I go out on the streets, I'm just not going out on the streets anymore. Crime rates rose. Oh, Trump has done the reverse. He's basically said to the cops, listen, we're on your side. We're with you. That's a very important thing. A lot of his appointments, a lot of his cabinet members have been good. Some of his cabinet members have not been so good. He's had a lot of cabinet hubbub. And I want to talk, those are all the good things about Trump. And that is a substantial list. This is a consequential president. Okay, he has done consequential things this year. All of the things I just mentioned are important and good. And frankly, I had no right to expect them. I don't think conservatives had necessarily a right to expect them, considering that President Trump campaigned as a guy wedded to no ideology, a guy who is not wedded to traditional conservatism, a guy who went around saying openly the Republican Party is not the Republican Party. It is not the Conservative Party. It's the Republican Party. Going around with Steve Bannon saying he was going to be a nationalist, populist president. I took him at his word. It turns out he has governed much more like Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush in many ways than he has like Pat Buchanan, for example. That's a great thing. So all of these are major accomplishments for the President of the United States. And as we continue, I want to talk about the other side of the coin. What exactly has President Trump done wrong? Because there's been a lot of media criticism. I think some of it has been unjustified. I think some of it has been justified. And if we're going to paint a full picture of how this year went for President Trump before I give my final grade for him for the year, then we have to do bad Trump. I just gave you all the good Trump. Now it's time for bad Trump. When we return, I'm Ben Shapiro in for Glenn Beck.
Glenn Beck.
If your credit card bills have gotten out of hand, call Consolidated Credit now. They can consolidate your debts, reduce your interest rates, and get you out of debt fast. Call Consolidated Credit now. 800-440-1636. 800-440-1636. That's 800-440-1636. Consolidated Credit Counseling Services Incorporated. 5701 West Sunrise Boulevard, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. 33313. Not a loan company. Licensed by the New York Department of Financial Services and by the Vermont Department of Financial Regulation. Maryland DM 19. Oregon DM 80031. Licensed by Virginia State Corporation Commission DC 32.
Glenn Beck.
Okay, so we just went through a lot of the great things that President Trump has done this year. Now I want to talk about the other side because, let's face it, his approval rating right now is 24% underwater. A lot of Americans don't like him. Now, a lot of Americans weren't going to like him from the last election cycle when, let's put it this way. You weren't getting any of the good, or at least a lot of the good. You were getting a lot of the bad. You were getting all of Trump's personality and none of the policy. Now that he's president, you get his personality and the policy has been a lot better than I expected it to be completely fair to the guy. But you got his personality too. And here's the thing. The president of the United States basically has two roles: to do stuff and to push stuff. These are not the same. Doing stuff means all of the things we talked about: appointing judges, cutting regulations, passing tax bills and signing them. Pushing stuff means, can you push the conservative idea forward? Can you push the founding notions forward? And this is where I think Trump has really failed. I was talking to a member of the administration relatively recently, and they asked me, how I thought they were doing. And I said, do you want my real answer or my fake answer? He said, give me your real answer. I said, on policy, I think you guys are doing great. On messaging, I think you guys are awful. And the reason for that is because the president has problems sticking to a topic. The president has an unfortunate tendency to be reactionary. Anybody who likes him is his friend. Anybody who dislikes him is his enemy. And you see that on display when we get to bad Trump now. So again, I'm trying to be as fair-minded about this as possible. I don't think everything Trump does is genius. I don't think everything he does is terrible. So let's do bad Trump now. I gave you all his accomplishments. Now it's time for bad Trump. Here are the things he's done wrong. Number one, Charlottesville response. There is no way the president of the United States should have responded to the killing of an innocent woman by white supremacists in Charlottesville, by a white supremacist after a torch-lit rally, by actual people running around chanting racist slogans. There's no way that he should have said there were good people at that Friday night rally. It's just asinine. There's no way he should have equated the protesters against white supremacy to the actual white supremacists. If he wants to rip Antifa, by all means do it. Listen, Antifa ain't a friend of mine, right? I'm the guy who got protested at Berkeley to the extent that they needed 600 police officers. So I have pretty good credibility when it comes to ripping on Antifa. But that was not really the time or place to do it. There are plenty of times to rip Antifa. The president botched that one, and botched it in a really bad way, and it helped polarize the country. It also allowed Democrats to shift all discussion toward race, which was not a good move politically. Forget the moral. Okay, I think that it was bad that the way that Trump pulled out from the Trans-Pacific Partnership deal. Not because I was a huge fan of TPP, but because the way to do it would have been to renegotiate TPP. Trump didn't really know what TPP was. He thought that China was a member to TPP, that it was a sort of trade bloc that included China. The entire TPP structure was created in order to cut China out. China has maximized its trade influence in the region because we pulled out from TPP. They've cut a bunch of deals with surrounding countries. That's not good for U.S. foreign interests. Failure on Obamacare repeal. So we tried it twice this year. We failed both times. We got the individual mandate repealed, but none of the regulations have been repealed, and no substantial changes to Medicaid, which continues to be a need-based program funded by the federal government. He picked Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon never should have been anywhere near the levers of power. I'm going to talk about Bannon a little bit more in a little while. There's a big article on Vanity Fair about Bannon. I know Steve pretty well. I was, of course, an editor-at-large over at Breitbart for 4 years. For 2 of those, I was in the institutional editorial structure. I was on a phone call with Steve, an editorial phone call, twice a day for an hour a day for 2 years. So I know Steve pretty well. Steve Bannon, as part of the administration, was a disaster area from the beginning. Steve always had Steve's interest at heart. His willingness to collude, not with the Russians, but with the alt-right, was morally despicable during the election. And his self-aggrandizing sense of personal power was damaging to the administration in the utmost. I mean, his advice to Trump was just not good. Picking Mike Flynn, terrible idea. There are a lot of people like me warning, do not pick Mike Flynn. The guy has a checkered past. Picking Flynn is going to get you in trouble. Bad move. He never should have fired James Comey. If he was going to fire James Comey, he should have fired him right up front. He should have said, listen, new administration, new FBI director. Would have been very simple. Firing him when he did, then going on national television and saying that he did it and it relieved pressure over the Russia scandal, and then telling the Russians that, just stupid. Most of the problems that Trump has made are problems he's made for himself. They're not problems made by circumstance. They're not problems made by the media. Okay, the media can only follow on problems Trump makes for himself. Okay, now the media will make up things. The media will. They'll create false narratives like that the tax bill hurts poor people. They will make things up. But a lot of the things that the media criticized Trump on was them taking a kernel that Trump had given them and then spinning it into an entire yarn. Right? The overall Russian investigation botchery is really Trump's fault, right? He fired Comey. He did so by using Rod Rosenstein. Sessions had already recused himself, and you end up with a special investigator. Just stupid. No border wall, right? Lack of a border wall. Ann Coulter's been fighting mad over this one. She has a right to be. This was supposedly his number one promise. The push for a new deferred action for childhood arrivals program in Congress. Now, that was something that Trump said he was not going to do, and then he's basically done it. The biggest thing is the constant barrage of nonsense. Right? From shouting fake news at real news, saying that all of the media are fake news. jabbering about crowd size nonsensically at the beginning of his administration, asking why there was a civil war, telling myths about General Pershing, a weeks-long crusade against the NFL. Been fine. You want to say that it's dumb to kneel for the anthem? Go for it. Weeks-long crusade against the NFL, polarizing some of the only common area we still have when there were like two guys kneeling at the time, going after LeVar Ball. I mean, it seemed like every week there was some sort of Twitter outrage. If someone could get to the president's phone and just unplug it, or install a dummy version of Twitter where people are giving him feedback in real time, but they're fake people. It's all members of the administration telling him he's doing great, but the tweets never go out to the public. His public approval rating would be up 10 points. The endorsement of Roy Moore, the late endorsement of Roy Moore, Trump should have stayed out of this race. He had no business in this race. It damaged his credibility. It made him look like he didn't care about the allegations against Roy Moore. There's one thing to say, vote against Doug Jones. I get it. It was a totally another thing to campaign for Roy Moore. Attacking his own staffers, people like Attorney General Jeff Sessions. I think Attorney General Sessions has actually done a pretty good job. I thought he was a pretty good senator. I think he's a pretty good Attorney General. Attacking Rod Rosenstein. Attacking the Health and Human Services Secretary. Attacking Rex Tillerson. Attacking members of your own administration publicly is not a smart move. And the biggest problem, I think, in terms of actual policy, is failing to staff up the federal government. Trump has done a good job nominating appellate judges, but he has not done well in filling career posts at various agencies. So what do you make of it? What's the overall? So here is my overall assessment. My overall assessment is that Trump has made some serious strides. He's made a lot of accomplishments, he's accomplished a lot, particularly in the last weeks. The last 3 weeks, as I say, have been stellar for conservatives. But the huge number of setbacks are helping cripple his own program. It's making it difficult for him to pass things. He loses leverage with his own senators when he attacks them. That has not been helpful. That's why his approval rating is so low. So, final yearly grade for the president, I give him a C+. That's an optimistic view, because a month ago it would have been a C-. I give him a C+ for tax reform and move to Jerusalem. He's really making strides in the right direction. If he continues that up, he could be a very consequential and, yes, a good president. But he's going to need to shift his rhetoric to meet his action. If he can do that, things will change. I'm going to get your thoughts coming up on your grades for President Trump. Ben Shapiro in for Glenn Beck.
Glenn Beck. This is the Glenn Beck Program.
Alrighty, so I gave you my grade for President Trump, year one. The reality show has been pretty spectacular, and the last month the policy's been great to match. But my overall grade for the president is C+. That's an optimistic-looking C+, because a lot of the good stuff was coming right at the end. If you had told me a month ago, grade President Trump, I give him a C-. If you told me to grade him the end of this month, I give him a C+. He gets the tax reform package passed. He gets he's making a strong stand against the UN, the movement of the embassy to Jerusalem, the opening of public lands. He's gotten a lot done in the last 3 weeks. Right? It's a big Christmas rush. So good for President Trump there. Now let's get some of your grades. Susan in Pennsylvania, you're on the Glenn Beck program with Ben Shapiro.
Hi, Ben. Thank you very much. I couldn't agree with you more, and I think if I was to divide it up between foreign and domestic, I give Trump actually an A on the foreign stage, the return of the concept of peace through strength, that we're America, we're for freedom, and that's better. I'm sorry. Deal with it. All of that. Nikki Haley has been tremendous. So on that front, I give him an A. On the domestic front, I give him a C-, and that came up from a D- because of the tax bill, but just because of so much of what he's done is so easily reversible, as you were mentioning yesterday, and because I think he hopefully maybe now is realizing, because he kept quiet during the tax bill debate, that when he speaks stupidly, he becomes political poison. And so It's more difficult for legislators to align with him, because they're thinking of how they have to justify themselves when they go back home.
I think that's exactly right, Susan. I totally agree with you. And I think that this is the thing that a lot of Trump supporters should realize. It's not when people criticize him for his rhetoric, it's not because we want him to fail. It's because we'd like him to succeed. Like, do better, Mr. President, right? That's it's coming from that place for me, because I always want the president to succeed, especially when he's pushing policies that I like. So I'm with you, and I obviously agree with your assessment. Thanks for the call. I see John in Louisiana. Go for it, John.
Hey, Ben, thank you. I actually agree with you just about 100% on your good Trump, bad Trump assessment. However, apparently I weight some of the more substantial things he's done more heavily, so I give him an overall score of an A, not an A minus, but an A. Tax reform is absolutely gigantic. It jumps off the page. Reduced business regulations. Look at the stock market. The stock market is a forward-looking entity, not backwards-looking. He gets full credit for this. The reason I don't bump it up to an A plus or even a higher A is his style is absolutely horrible. I think he's his own worst enemy. I get the Twitter thing. He gets to go straight to the people. He can bypass the media. In theory, that's fantastic. If he could throttle back the rawness, the stupidity of his Twitters, there's got to be somebody in the administration that agrees with this and can filter out the raw stupidity.
Yeah, John, the real question is going to be whether Trump allows that to happen. You know, I think that's really the question. Exactly. Is everybody knows in the administration, everybody knows that this is a problem. I think Trump may be getting to realize that. If he realizes that, then he's actually going to be a political force. And, the thing is, you and I agree on, I think, pretty much everything that you just said. I think that you're just suffering from a little bit of grade inflation here. But like, I'm actually using the lower end of the grading spectrum for some of this stuff. But I don't disagree with anything that you just said. My hope is that he will bring, I'm giving him room for upward trajectory, upward growth. It seems like you're giving him room to move from a 92 to a 97. I'm giving him room to move from basically like a 78 to a 97, right? I think there's a lot of room for growth for the president. A lot of this is going to be reliant on the president, and John, thanks for the call. A lot of this is going to be reliant on the president really continuing to pursue conservative policy agenda items. So some of the things he's talking about doing for 2018 include welfare reform. This would be great. We need to add more work requirements to welfare. We do. Some of the things that he's talking about doing include, new military builds up. I think that would be a worthwhile thing. But some of the stuff that he's talking about, these infrastructure plans, that ain't great. We may have gotten the most conservative period out of the Trump administration already, right? We may have moved beyond conservative Trump, and now he's going to go bipartisan, try to work with Democrats. The only saving grace here, and this is the thing about the Democrats being so out of their minds with regard to Trump himself, is that what could keep Trump in the conservative box is the fact that Democrats will not work with him. Right? That's what could keep him in the conservative box. It's not that Trump wants to stay there. Trump may want to do an infrastructure plan with Chuck Schumer, but it's quite possible, or DACA with Chuck Schumer, it's quite possible the Democrats will refuse to work with him, and Trump will end up being conservative by default. That's something I can live with. I just hope that he can shift the public perception of him so that the programs that he sides with, which are now largely programs I agree with, are more and more popular. Larry in Florida, how do you assess the president, sir?
Thanks for having me on, Ben. My initial reaction is emotional, and so I went straight A, because I have lived through and I would say tolerated 8 years of the Obama administration, which on a daily basis made me cringe. And this is so different from that my initial reaction is to go with the A. But then, in being honest with myself and everybody else, I'm going back to B plus from A for style. I'm taking points off for style for exactly what you're talking about. And I have to say that overall, in life in general, I am so much more encouraged since the presidential election, and since, believe it or not, since I started following you and many of the things that you're doing. You're 20 years my junior, and I am so encouraged that there's somebody younger than me that actually thinks the right way. So
I appreciate it, Larry. It's very kind of you. And I think that this is an opportunity, and that's why what you say, bringing Trump back down to a B plus, I think that's actually important, because if you want to have an upward trajectory with young people particularly, one of the things to notice about the polls is that older Americans are basically cool with Trump. It's younger Americans who have a problem with him, because his style really clashes with sort of what they've been taught to believe is decent and right. And Trump does need to play within a few more boxes. I understand that everyone thinks he won because he was playing out of the box. There is some truth to that. But he also won because Hillary Clinton was the most disliked candidate in American history. I don't know that Democrats are going to repeat that feat by nominating someone remote. Is there another human being as unlikable as Hillary Clinton? I'm not sure. They're going to have to dig to come up with one. They may have to actually unearth a grave and then revivify a corpse to come up with somebody more unlikable than Hillary Clinton. Larry, thanks so much for the call, and thanks for listening. Okay, so one of the things that I think that we are learning is that the president, with good guidance, can do a lot of damage. And one of the people who he got rid of, and you've seen some good changes thanks to it. One of the people that he got rid of was Steve Bannon. There's a big article at Vanity Fair today about Steve Bannon, as I say, my old boss over at Breitbart. And in it, Steve basically rips the president up and down. He suggests that the president is like an 11-year-old. He suggests the president's not going to run for re-election. And Steve talks about how he wants to run for president. And Steve is saying this because Steve is entirely driven by his own perception of self-importance. He thinks he's the most important person who has ever walked the earth. Steve does not actually have a thoroughgoing ideology. He doesn't have a serious philosophy. You know, the fact is that Steve is really more about the perception of his own power broadly than he is about any sort of program. And one of the things I've been encouraged by is the return of a programmatic element to the Trump administration in the absence of Bannon. And Bannon was doing this whole, we're going to do something new, nationalist populism. What's wrong with founding principle? What was wrong with Ronald Reagan's small government conservatism? Was there something deeply off-putting about it? I missed that part. Why did we need these BS words that were being trotted out? Things like populism. Populism is not a policy agenda. Populism is you just shouting the word elite over and over until you get a bunch of blue-collar folks to believe you're on their side. Yeah, it's not an actual group of policy preferences. And Bernie Sanders is a populist. Does that mean he's right? No, actually. And Steve Bannon's notions of nationalism, right, as opposed to patriotism. Patriotism is the idea that you believe in America because the American creed is better than any other creed ever come up with, and the American people have been shaped by that creed. Nationalism is just the idea that you live in the country, therefore you're better. That's nonsense. It's been nonsense everywhere it's been tried. Patriotism is the belief America is better because America is better, not because we are here. And there is a big difference there. The reason that I bring up Bannon now is because I think that if Republicans want to win the future, if conservatives want to win the future, then they are going to need to set some moral standards. And this has been the drawback for Trump, is that he's pushed a lot of policy I love, but he hasn't set moral standards yet. Maybe it's hard for him to do so. He's going to need to do so. Because what you see is that when the intestines of the party, the folks like Bannon, run the party, what you end up with is embracing a bunch of people who end up crippling you in elections just for the temporary high of supporting them. And I speak right now of Roy Moore. Right? Bannon actually suggests in this piece that George H.W. Bush, who's been accused of grabbing a couple of women on the behind, that George W. Bush is H.W. Bush is a pervert. I forget the fact he's a war hero, forget the fact that he served heroically in World War II and spent his life in public service. He says he's a pervert, but Roy Moore is hunky-dory. And that was Steve Bannon's perspective. And even the people that Steve Bannon runs over at Breitbart don't believe this. There's an article today over at CNN where Alex Marlow, a guy with whom I used to work, a guy with whom I'm friends, now Alex says that even at Breitbart, they believed that Roy Moore was guilty, but they went out of their way to try to exonerate him because they were trying to make excuses for accusations against President Trump. Okay, that is not moral behavior. That is not moral behavior. Conservatives only win when they are perceived as both efficient and moral. If you are perceived as immoral, you will not win hearts and minds. You will not win the future. You will not win anything. So yes, I'll take all the policy wins. But now we need to reestablish the notion that America is a moral place with moral leadership and that the conservative movement is built around values and virtue and morality. This is why I think that what Trump does on foreign policy resonates so much more than what he's doing on domestic policy. Because on foreign policy, there's no question that Trump is acting in moral fashion. There's no question that President Trump is pursuing a virtuous moral policy abroad. What we need is for that to be extended here at home. We need to feel like Trump is fighting for the right things. I mean morally right, not just the things that we like. If he does that, then maybe we can shift perceptions. If not, Republicans can argue efficiency until the cows come home. But if people believe the Democrats are the people with the better hearts and the more moral policy, then Democrats will win no matter how successful the economy is. And remember, the economy is doing great right now, and Trump is still at 37%. So something needs to change. Well, as we continue here on the Glenn Beck program, another court has stepped in doing something it ought not do, exceeding its boundaries, exceeding its abilities under the Constitution. We'll talk about it. Ben Shapiro in for Glenn Beck.
Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck.
Ben Shapiro here for Glenn Beck. Just an honor to join you right before the end of the year, and especially on Glenn's show. Glenn is a personal hero of mine and a friend. So a 3-judge panel on a federal appeals court ruled Thursday against the Trump administration's efforts to delay accepting transgender recruits into the military. So you recall that President Trump had tweeted out that the military would no longer accept transgender recruits. And then he had said that he had issued a policy along those lines. The Defense Department was unclear whether they were implementing or not. And now judges say that the Trump administration cannot do that. The judiciary needs to be remade. It needs to be remolded. One of Trump's best accomplishments is his appointment of 12 appellate court judges. That's more than any other president in his first year ever. That's great. It needs to be accelerated. The appeals courts are just egregious. And these panel decisions that stay obvious authority that the president of the United States has, just absurd. Okay, the president of the United States is the commander-in-chief. He's the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. He has the capacity to make calls like this. There is decent logic behind it. I would prefer he let General Mattis lay out the rationale for why transgender troops in the military breaks down social cohesion. But does Trump have the power to do it? Of course he does. Just another institutional obstacle the president has had to overcome. Okay, so we're nearing the end of the program. It's right before Christmas. And I think that we should dedicate ourselves this year to moving beyond politics. You know, I talk about politics full time. I spend my days talking about politics and thinking about politics. But one of the things I've been really thinking about over the last couple of years, is that we are really at each other's throats over politics all the time. And it's easy to get caught up in the gamesmanship if we got something we wanted, or we didn't get something we wanted. In order for us to share a country, we're really going to need to rebuild our social fabric. And that's what the holidays are for. It's what Christmas is for. It's what this time of year is for. It's what we should be doing every day. It's why it's important that we go to church together, that we go bowling together. It's why it's important that we spend time together as family and not think about politics, that we turn off our phone, that we turn off our TV, that we spend some time thinking about how to shape our own communities, our local communities, in better ways. Because without that social fabric, the founders believed we would crumble. They believed that the necessity for freedom, that requirement for freedom could only exist among a moral and religious people, is what John Adams said. And those moral and religious people could only fill the gap left by a non-overarching government if they're willing to act communally in ways to help each other. That's what building a social fabric is all about. It's something that we need to restore to the United States. The idea that our neighbor is our neighbor and that our neighbor may need our help. The idea that our neighbor is our neighbor, and even if we disagree, we need to cultivate a similar vision for happiness in the country, a vision built on virtue and purpose. That can't happen if we see ourselves as atomized individuals in a cold and meaningless universe. And when this time of year we think about God, when we think about the purpose of our lives, when we think about what it is that we'll be doing on our deathbeds, very little of it will have to do with how we voted. And a lot of it will have to do with how we treated our neighbors, the time that we spent with people in our community, the time we spent with family. So let's all treasure the next week and let's come back refreshed and rejoin the fight in January with the notion that our neighbors are still our neighbors, our brothers are still our brothers, our sisters are still our sisters, and that together we're going to move forward in a cruel and dark world where we are maybe the only remaining light. I'm Ben Shapiro in for Glenn Beck.
Glenn